Hey, and welcome to Matt and Jess TV. I am Matt Roast.
And I'm Jessica Bun Bun.
Welcome to our Severance Season 2, Episode 8 reaction and review. This is an episode titled Sweet Vitriol. I think this one's going to be memorable for a number of different reasons. I mean, for starters, yes, this is the big Harmony Cobel spotlight. I think a lot of people have had a lot of questions about her from the very, very beginning.
Absolutely. There's been a ton of questions about her of, where does she kind of actually fit in with this company? Is she just a Kier believer? Is she a Lumen believer? How long has she been with this company? I mean, there were some huge reveals about Harmony, her role in this company, how long she's been with this company since she's been a child.
Yeah.
And that all of this technology that they're using now is because of her.
There's so much fascinating stuff from a lore standpoint in this episode. There's also a lot of human stuff within this episode. Like, this discussion's going to have a lot of story time because I think it is applicable for the world that we're kind of seeing set up here. I mean, it's ironic in a way where this is one of the shortest episodes of Severance we've ever had. I mean, it's not even 40 minutes long. And yet I actually think that you can go deep with a lot of this stuff in a way that you can't go deep with every other episode, because I just think there is so much humanity that's kind of attached to some of these characters, even though there are people like Sissy and this other person, Hampton, I think is seemingly their name, that we have not really had a chance to see or experience before.
Absolutely. And I think with this episode too, we have so much lore about Lumen and how long this has been going on for.
Yeah.
I think it's very revealing how deep into this company Harmony is, so that when we do look back at that confrontation with her and Helena, how much it really does affect Harmony because of how long she's been with this company since she's been a child.
It's brutal. But even with that, like, that reveal also ties into a lot of things we already know and have seen with this show. So we have so much more to dive into here. Before we do, be sure to hit that subscribe button, because as a lot of you know, this is a go-to spot for all things Severance. We have reviews, we have theory discussions. We're going to have so much more of that through the rest of this season. I mean, we're also having a great time with some other great prestige shows like The White Lotus, which is in the midst of its third season, and Yellow Jackets is back as well.
And also, you can help support us further by joining our Patreon. We'll have a link for you below. It's a great way to be able to help support Matt and I here at the channel. We are covering over there exclusively The Pit, which is airing on Max right now.
Yeah.
We just finished up Prime Target, which is airing on Apple TV. And you already have Apple TV if you're watching Severance. And we're about to start covering Bosch Legacy. It is in its final season. It's going to be coming up in just a couple weeks. And that's the only place that you're able to get those reviews. And they go up weekly. So thank you so much to everyone who is supporting us.
Thank you guys so much. Now, I'm going to ask everybody, bear with me here, because I'm going to tell a story. And this story, I think, matters for the sake of what we're getting in this episode.
All right, so, story time.
We are getting a chance to see Salt's Neck, this community, which I believe, and we've talked about this a long time ago, that Severance did some filming in Newfoundland. Like, this really looked like this was where they were filming in Newfoundland.
It absolutely looks like Canada.
Yeah, like, for sure. Very seaside community. But we kind of see a lot in this episode that Lumen, the factory, everything that's going on with Ether, like, that these are things that have fundamentally shaped these communities. Now, for those of you who don't know, like, I grew up in North Texas. Like, we're out on the West Coast now, but a lot of, like, my actual family, my ancestors, like, a lot of them before, they came to America, but then after coming to America, a lot of them are from West Texas and a number of very small communities there. And this is very much oil country. It was covered rather ineffectively by Landman, but this is a part of the world where there's a lot of boom towns, and a lot of big business comes up when oil rigs are put together. But then when, something goes wrong or the oil starts to go away, people leave. But then because there's a dependence on these companies, the whole communities get devastated when they leave. There's a lot of things that happen. People lose their jobs. Economically, the town falls apart. Things get really, really depressing, or even with just like big corporations who come in, because these are very small communities. But then, a place like Walmart is like, oh, I'm going to come in here, build a Walmart. Everybody's going to come to my Walmart. But then people start to leave. Then that Walmart shuts down, and then nobody has anywhere to shop anymore because all the mom and pop organizations are shutting down. Like, this all works to me within the context of this episode, because I'm just looking at this community of Salt's Neck, and it's just that this place has been fundamentally destroyed
Mhm.
by Lumen. And I think perhaps more so than any other episode this season, where we're able to kind of, I know it's weird to call Severance a fantasy, but we have these things that are very elusive and hard to grasp onto when it comes to what is Lumen, what is this place that, Mark is living in. But here, it all actually feels really real, I think, in a way that a lot of the rest of the show doesn't feel this way.
Yeah, we've talked a little bit about that idea that maybe the innies and the outie world, where like a Mark is and everybody is
Yeah.
is very parallel, and that they are sort of the same, that
Mhm.
maybe it's two different of the same realities, where this place feels like a real community,
Yeah.
that where Lumen did come in at one point, where, when Harmony was a child, so was this waiter, that they had worked at this company very young age before they should be working,
Yeah.
and that this place gave a lot of jobs to the community. We've seen now them at that factory. It's all shuttered,
Yeah.
shut down. Nobody's working there anymore. We've seen the devastation in this town. Everybody's got these green bottles that they're, using to try to make their problems go away, feel a bit better about things. There's a lot of people there with a lot of health issues. Could this be from the factory? Very likely.
Yeah.
Everything that was going on there. This Lumen has come in and destroyed this town, and it feels like everybody's very resentful about it. So even when Harmony comes back, they're basically like, we don't want to see you. And then her wanting to go and see Sissy, even more so, they're like, nobody wants anything to do with Sissy, because she was really part of that Lumen landscape.
Yeah, the cure machine and the destruction that is placed on this town. Like, Ben Stiller directed this episode, and he was able to paint a lot of this in really just a couple of minutes. Just that scene with Harmony going back in the diner, the resentment, everything of her grand homecoming just ends up being total nothing. Really Big Barrett Final Fantasy VII vibes here for all of you fellow nerds out there. But it's just her whole sequence of being there and then meeting Sissy. It like sets up in a tiny amount of time. It's like, okay, she's not really welcome back here. So even at that point, we don't even know that big reveal when it comes to Lumen and Cobel yet, but we're kind of thinking already, it's like, okay, she had to know these people wouldn't want to see her, so she had to be coming back here for a very specific reason. It's not that she's just salty, that she felt like everybody did her dirty at the company. It's like, okay, there's something more here.
Yeah, because we do learn that she was like, through, education, the valedictorian of all this, Egan scholarships and all these things that are going on, the Wintertide scholarships. Like, she was really like the big deal at Lumen. And, later, of course, we learn it's because she created everything that had to do with the chip and all of it. She is behind all of it. Although she didn't get credit for any of it. It all went to an Egan instead. And it was like, oh, well, Kier says, don't take credit for anything. We're all in it together. And she's like, okay, that's cool when it's happening to me, but then it's okay for somebody else to take the credit for it. But because she was such this big player, even before, when she was still young, the town is not here with it, because the town has been left behind, where they have been getting sicker, and Lumen has left, and Harmony was this great big queen of Lumen, and now she actually stuck with it, where everyone else did not.
Yeah, it's all heartbreaking. And I mean, this is not the easiest episode to watch, I think, for a lot of those reasons, because it's really, really sad. And everything that this company did to this town is really, really sad. Not that I think that there's a lot of people that are out there caping for Lumen after what we saw with Gemma on this past episode, because it's clearly like their end goal is they want perfect workers. They want to do whatever it is, to quote unquote take over the world, whatever that means for them. That's a little bit of a mystery still, but they their whole idea is they just want to take advantage of people. And the interesting mystery in all of this is Cobel coming back, spending time with Sissy. You kind of wonder at that point, okay, is she there just to reckon with her past, or is she there to actually figure out her future? And it turns out to be a little bit more of the latter. But I think in those opening moments where you see her with Sissy, it kind of feels more like the former, like she's trying to actually, figure something out.
Yeah, I mean, watching Harmony in that bed and with the tube and
Yeah.
crying from like morning to night, it
Yeah.
was so heartbreaking.
Yeah, it really was. And I mean, you guys can debate this with me in the comments of like, what is Sissy's real relationship to Cobell? Because it felt to me like maybe she was an aunt, maybe she was someone with that sort of connection, because she refers to Harmony's mother at one point as your mother. And so the only way I could see her doing that if they were siblings was like if she hated this woman so much she refused to acknowledge her as her own parent. And then
Yeah.
that gets a little bit weird. I mean, you can kind of say it doesn't really matter because it's ultimately just about they were family. Harmony's mother was family. They all have that sort of familial connection. So that's really the only important thing.
Yeah, I mean, we did see a plaque on the wall that said that Sissy's last name is also Cobell, so she is in this family. It makes sense that she would maybe be an aunt or something like that. It says
Yeah.
that she was the youth apprentice matron, so she
Yeah.
was the person who was sort of in charge of all the kids that were at
Mhm.
Lumen and going through this part. It's so dark.
Yeah.
It's so dark.
It's all extremely dark, and it all goes back to all these theories that so many of us have had with Miss Huang, because the name Wintertide has been brought up both on the show before and
Yep.
in this episode. So this
Yes.
is clearly a program that Lumen has devised for extremely young people who
Yes.
should not be working yet, but they're clearly with this terrible philosophy of, oh, if we can get to these people really early, we can implant them, whether it is with chips, whether it is just with information. We've speculated here that like maybe they're passing along traits of Kier into all of their employees, so they all have a little bit of Kier juice within them. But getting to people early while they're still kind of in these formative stages, one, they're going to be easier to influence, but
Right.
then two, you're also just going to have them working longer, like several decades, as opposed to maybe just 3 decades if they come to work with you when you're just say 25. Like it's all terrible.
Or even younger. I mean, Harmony, when she was sitting
Yeah.
on the bed with this waiter, was just like, "Oh, we haven't done this since I was 8." I'm like, "Yo, 8? Wow, bro, are you okay? That is so young, right?" But
Yes.
we did see that she got this Wintertide fellowship pretty young,
Yeah.
like maybe in her like later teens or something
Yeah.
like that. And we know that Miss Huang is also trying to work towards this Wintertide
Yeah.
fellowship. So clearly, whatever Lumen was doing, working with children back then, they are still doing it now. Like, even Miss Huang was, asked about that. Like, like, why are you a child? She's just like, because this is when I was born. Like, I don't know what you're asking, kind of thing.
Yeah.
It feels completely normal for her to be like, yeah, of course I'm working here. Like, why is this weird to you? I don't understand.
Yeah.
Because it seems like Lumen has been doing this with children for decades.
Okay, I'm going to introduce a new outfit here. I'm going to put on my professor coat, which ironically, I actually have a coat
I
that looks like a
know.
professor coat, and I'm not
Yep.
even wearing it. But okay, so the part of, I'm not saying I'm an expert on US history by any means, but like the part of US history I think I know the best is sort of the late 19th century. And without going too far into weeds of anything, we know that Lumen was founded in the late 1860s, like kind of around that era. And when we're moving a little bit later in that era, we're moving to where a lot of these businesses are really starting to boom. And you go back and read biographies of a lot of the really, really rich people, the Andrew Carnegies, like all of these people, that they existed in this world where there were a lot of people working in extremely dangerous jobs at really, really young ages. And it feels to me, now I can put on a tinfoil hat.
All right.
It feels to me that a lot of the teachings of Lumen and a lot of the quote unquote Kier teachings are basically just things that he came up with all the way back in the 19th century. And while the rest of the world has evolved when it comes to some of these philosophies that are like, oh, kids shouldn't be working, when they're not even teenagers, it's just like the company itself is not caring, and it's still subscribing to these thoughts that Kier may have had. And because people, whether it be through chips or whatever else, still have all this Kier juice in them, like they see no real reason to change it.
Absolutely. And with this sort of threat of being banished
Yeah.
or kicked out, and since you've been so young and you've believed in Kier and the teachings and all of this, that
Yeah.
now that Harmony is this age and she's been doing this since presumably she was 8, who knows, it could have
Yeah.
been younger, that now that she's here and she's like, you know what, I'm going to get my old books. I've hidden them. They're still there.
Yeah.
That show that I'm the person that was behind all of these different things. It wasn't, Jamie Egan.
Yeah.
It was me. But because I was told that Kier's knowledge is for all,
Yeah.
and if you, try to get credit for it, you're going to be banished. That the idea of being kicked out of something like that is something that a lot of people in general are afraid of different religions and different whatever. Oh,
Yeah.
if you do this, you're going to be banished. You're going to be kicked out. You're not going to be part of the group anymore. But now that Harmony is this age, she's
Yeah.
just like, yeah, I just feel like none of this is correct anymore. I don't care. I've already been kicked out and I did everything right. I did everything that you guys said. I kept quiet about the fact that I'm actually the creator of all this.
Mhm.
I let the Egans take credit for everything. And how have I been, rewarded for it? I've been kicked out right at the end of Mark's progress.
Yeah, this is the only life she's ever known. And I think that informs so much of her character and her choices.
Like a dedication of your whole life to
Yeah.
this, to just have the rug pulled out at the very end.
Yeah.
And the sacrifices she made and things that she knew weren't right, like that she's the person who's created all of this,
Yeah.
but she had to keep quiet about it because you're not supposed to take credit, but then watch somebody else take credit.
Yeah.
I mean, that had to have been sitting with her for a long time. I mean, the Egans just really made a mistake not letting her continue on the floor. Like, they just needed to continue to keep her as docile as they could.
Yeah.
Not that I'm caping for Lumen, but that's what they needed to do.
Well, that's, I think, what makes this episode so interesting. Like, I'll sit here and be honest. Like, this isn't my favorite episode of the season. Like, it's not anywhere close to last week to me. It's still really compelling, though, just because you get onto a lot of these discussions, including this idea of, okay, so Harmony had this position at Lumen, which I'm guessing, being on the floor, must have been some sort of arrangement that was made where it was like, okay, you've done all of this for us. You've done so much. You've devised this technology. We're going to give you a chance to see it in action. And
Right.
I'm not saying Harmony is the most sympathetic character on the show, because she's not, but
No.
it makes so much more sense now why she is so upset about being taken off the floor, because they're basically just taking her creation away from her fully and then giving it to other people who don't presumably understand it in the same way in which she does. And I think at the same time, she's probably acutely aware of this idea that she's far from the first person who has been ripped off by Lumen over the course of time. Like, I'm sure there have been so many other people, but because of what you've said and what we've laid out here, it's the only life she's known. They just impart in you that this is what you do for the sake of the greater good. And we don't know how wealthy or how powerful exactly these higher ups are, but I'm pretty sure that they are like Scrooge McDucking themselves and all this money that people like Harmony have made for them.
For sure. I mean, we've talked before about the
Yeah.
idea, that Lumen is doing this for multiple reasons. Of
Mhm.
course, they want control and have, docile workers who will do whatever they need and just work from childhood all the way till they're dead.
Yeah.
And who knows, possibly past
Oh,
that. I
man,
mean, who
I know.
knows, right? But it feels like it does go further than that. That it is, of course, they want
Mhm.
corporate domination to be able to make lots of money, to be able to control people at
Yeah.
work. But it's probably a testing ground to be like, okay, if we can control people at work from childhood all the way to adulthood, then what's to say that we're not able to just control the world?
So I think where things obviously get incredibly fascinating now, because we know Harmony was able to get her documents, she was able to get her work, she can leave Salt's Neck, and I mean, we'll get into the Mark part of it in a minute, but I'm just thinking strictly, okay, sure, you have all the proof that everything that you did, like, that's phenomenal. where are you going to go with that people are going to care? And this is where I guess tinfoil hats are already on, but
They are.
we had this discussion earlier this season about whether or not Bert was on the board. And I'm kind of wondering now, it's like, okay, I had kind of thought that Bert had actually done a lot of the things that Harmony has done. But I kind of think now, though, if Bert was on the board or is on the board or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
can you go to him, show him some of what you've done, and basically be like, here, I'm going to jog your memory in case Lumen has tried to take some of this away from you, because it feels like we're getting set up for this showdown. But the problem is, who does Cobel really have on her side?
Mark. And I think that's where this Devon call
Mhm.
is, finally coming in. Like in the last episode, it felt like
Yeah.
at that time that Devon may or may not have called Cobel, but for whatever reason, she didn't show up.
Yeah.
We had felt like maybe she didn't call because she didn't show up, right? But we know that Cobel was out in the world hiding out from Elena anyways,
Yeah.
right? So why would she show up? We've seen in this episode now that Devon did call her
Yeah.
multiple times, but the timing wasn't right. Finally, she gets through and she's like, hey, okay, this is what's happened. She hears Ragabi's name. She's like, okay, Mark is reintegrating. Put Mark on the phone. It feels like this is now the right connection. Harmony is not okay with Lumen, is not
Yeah.
okay with what's going on. It was her idea. She thought she was going to be able to see it through. She didn't get to. She's been completely kicked off of the case now.
Yeah.
I think for Harmony, it's not all noble. I think she still wants to see things through. And the way that she's able to do that is to work with Mark and to go there and help Devon.
I think it's a very interesting, complicated scenario at this point, because it's like she might have the same end goal as Lumen, but does she like what they're doing in pursuit of that end goal? Like maybe that's where things get a little bit messy, or maybe she is still a part of the ultimate any side, no, but the ultimate enemy side,
Right.
where she's really out for the darkest outcome, and it's actually people like Milchick potentially, or even Helena, if people can get through to Helena, like who actually could change things in a more fundamental way. But it's complicated because Mark may be one of the only people you have at this point. I did find it really fascinating that it seemed as though Mark was really willing to be a part of this and have a conversation with Cobel at this point. So at the time, at the end of this episode, it wasn't just Devon like making this decision independently, that Mark was there and Mark was involved in it.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised at this point to hear Mark actually take the phone and that he wasn't like, no, we're going to call back Ragabi and we're going to
Yeah.
deal with it that way. But it might be a situation where Devon was like, listen,
Yeah.
Ragabi told me that if I called Cobel, that it would be a no from Ragabi. She wasn't going to come back. And I've called Cobel 3 times. So this is our only option at this point.
Yeah, I think it's the only option. I think the other question now that we have to wonder is, okay, in what state is Mark really in at the time of this phone call? Because if he is completely reintegrated in this sense, then he would have access to, okay, this is everything that seemingly happened with Cobel for the best of my knowledge. I know that I haven't seen her around Lumen anytime recently. I know fully what Helena has done to me. I know a little bit more about what's going on there. So maybe this is somebody who I have to kind of work with if I actually want answers. At the very least, she might know what's going on with Gemma, and that's really the thing that have to count on the most, because we already know that Cobel has known some stuff about Gemma.
Yeah, she knows. And Mark knows that she knows. So for me, it makes sense that
Yeah.
he would be like, okay, if Cobel's willing to talk to me, I need some more answers. And Cobel definitely has those answers. So if Cobel wants something out of me, which he does,
Yeah.
then, she's going to have to give as well.
That's the really fascinating part of all of this, because I think it's really easy for a lot of us to think that Mark is going to go to, I don't know, medieval times and steal one of their suits of armor and pull this on and go and charge into Lumen with the sword ready to take over the company. But that's not really his end goal. Like, he just wants Gemma. Like, I'm very curious if he gets Gemma and Cobel ends up helping him. Like, is that then going to be it? Or is he going to hear all these terrible stories about Gemma and then it's going to evolve into something else?
That's the biggest question right now coming out of this is, what is Cobel's motive going to be at this point?
Yeah.
Is she actually done with Lumen? Is she actually done with Kier? She's going to take her information and help Mark? Or does she feel that because she is the person who created all of this,
Yeah.
that she continues to need to be in charge, and she is going to find a way to make that happen instead? That, she's been the person behind this since she was
Yeah.
very, very young, since she was a child. She is going to want to see it to completion. And the only way she can do that is to get with Mark. So it's going to be very interesting going into this next episode to know what her real motivation is. Is it she's actually done with Lumen, she's actually done with Kier, or she's ready to step into, the highest high with Lumen and Kier, and she's going to use Mark to do it.
That's just what's so fascinating about all of this is we get this big Cobel episode that I think a lot of us have been wanting for a really long time.
Mm-hmm.
And yet at the end of it, we still don't know exactly where Cobel really stands with anything. And it's even more heartbreaking because now we know fully what Lumen and Kier and all this stuff has done to this community, but it still may not matter all that much if she legitimately really believes in Kier. And even some people in this town, still seem on some level to believe in Kier. Not all of them, obviously, but it's still really morally compromised.
Yeah. And there's a lot of us out there that have felt like Harmony is maybe not with Lumen anymore, but she's still drinking the Gear juice. She really believes in this. And if that's the case, then she's going to want to see Mark complete everything with Gemma and get to the other side of Cold Harbor. She's going to want to see it completed.
Okay, so now that we've kind of gone through a lot of the theoretical stuff and takeaways from this episode, I think there are two really big challenges that this particular installment is currently facing. I think number one, and I could be very, very wrong. Comments may all say that they love this episode to the ends of the earth, but I do wonder if it is a little bit too tedious for some viewers to have the Gemma episode last week and now the Cobel episode, and we've basically gone away from the main action of the show for 2 weeks now, and we're not that far from the end of the season. I do think that's asking a lot of your viewers, but at the same time, it feels like they're promising us a really fancy dinner, but they're making us eat some vegetables first. And after we eat our vegetables, we'll get the dinner and we'll understand why the courses were presented in that way.
Yeah, having the full Gemma episode, which was great, having the full Cobel episode, which is very revealing, it has taken us away from the main story for multiple episodes in a row. Typically we've seen with other shows like Walking Dead or whatever, where it's you have a main story, then you have just one character, then you have a little more main story than just one character. They break it up a little more. It's very rare that you have back to back, just one character when you have some pretty major heavy stuff that's going on in your main storyline.
So because they've done this, they have really set themselves up in a spot where these final episodes this season really has to pay a lot of this off, really justify it, given that I've said the season 1 finale is my favorite episode of Severance, and it's still very much the case. I have faith that they're going to be able to do all of it, but this is a very challenging episode, especially since everybody is still speaking in their whole weird 19th century Kier dialogue, and it's all kind of elusive, but I think it's a fascinating look at this place, and it's a fascinating look at the contrast between this place and who Cobel is and who she might still want to be.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much for being with us here on Severance Season 2, Episode 8. But be sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss more coverage of this show, Yellow Jackets, The White Lotus, so much good stuff happening at the channel. And you can support us further by joining our Patreon. That link is in the description below. We have reviews in video form of The Pit. We have Bosch Legacy coming up there as well. Thank you so much to our patrons. We'll see you here next time.